So we all know that salt has a reputation for increasing blood pressure, and it's one of those things that we can take a hold of and start to look at our intake of salt in order to help reduce blood pressure. But does reducing salt make much of an impact? Well, what I'm going to have a look at over the next couple of slides is whether it does or not, and what we can do to increase that optimum reduction of salt. And everything that applies for blood pressure in what I'm going to say today also applies at a cellular level, because if we can get this electrolyte balance between sodium and potassium correctly, then it's going to make an enormous difference to the way that we feel, and also definitely to blood pressure. So just thinking about dietary sodium, that is what we take in as sodium from what we eat, what they found was that certainly they know from this study and many studies that if we have a lot of sodium coming in, a high salt intake, then we have a much greater risk of high blood pressure and a much greater risk because of that of stroke and heart attack. Now, this particular study is running for over 25 years. It's the EPIC study. It's been done with a population group in Norfolk of 30,000 people. So that's a huge number of people, and they're looking at health checks and following up data about what they're consuming. So it's a really beneficial and interesting study to look at. So in this study, men and women who consumed the least salt of all, and that is about 5 grams daily or less, so that is roughly a teaspoon, they had average lower blood pressure and were at half the risk of high blood pressure or hypertension, compared with people who consumed twice that amount, or obviously perhaps slightly less, about 10 grams, about 2 teaspoons. Now, what they found was that if people reduced that intake by up to a teaspoon or less, they could halve their chances of getting high blood pressure. But never mind halving our chances, what I'm going to look at next is, well, how can we genuinely lower blood pressure using the diet? And when they looked in comparison with people who ate a high amount of vegetables and fruit, they found that that appeared to be protective against high blood pressure. Now, this is because potassium and sodium have an interaction with each other. They're able to displace each other from the cells of our body. And so if we consume a decent amount of fruit and veg in particular, then what happens is that we enable the kidneys to excrete sodium more easily. We enable our cells to be in a more alkaline state. That is, they are alkalized by the potassium, which will be structuring water in a particular way in the cells, just as it does in vegetables. And what they found was that raising potassium is just as important as reducing sodium. So it's not just taking salt out that makes a difference, it's having a really great intake of vegetables and fruit as well. So never mind the 5 a day, I always recommend 9 or 10 a day is a great idea.